Oh, hey. Alright, my goal here is to actually get you started sculpting and making as fast as possible. So let's say you want to make a guy like this. Well, you're gonna have to learn anatomy. So, if you see me, I'm moving my tablet across the screen without clicking any extra buttons like Blender would normally have by default. After you download it, you're going to want to go to Edit Preferences, go to the Addons section, click Install, and install the zip folder. I already have it installed, so I'm just going to use the search bar to find it. So, open up the drop down. Your install will usually start in Settings. You want to click on Key Maps. Then you're going to want to find Presets, and click on the Load preset and load up whichever one you want. Now that that's done, you're going to add a icosphere, clicking Shift A on your keyboard and going through the menu to find an icosphere. The reason we're making an icosphere is because it starts as triangles, and that means that it's always ready to be sculpted on. If you notice, I'm fiddling with a menu in the left-hand corner. This is available to any object that you make in Blender. I use Snakehook, which is also in ZBrush, called Snakehook, I think. And I use that to stretch and bend my model outwards wherever I need it. I then use Grab to just maneuver and move my object around while maintaining volumes to get whatever shapes I need. I use Clay Strips in Blender, Clay Buildup in ZBrush, to basically dig holes and create volume on my model. So one key thing I do constantly when I'm just sculpting with voxels is I will hit R. R is the shortcut for the visual grid. This allows you to know how much you're going to be remeshing. So remesh is actually Control R. There are actually 3 ways to access remeshing in Blender. One is you can go up to the top right corner and it says remesh. Another is right here, Data Object Properties tab. Then go to remesh, and then you can remesh with either quad or voxel. I use Control R and R a lot, so I'll do that. Basically what this is doing is remeshing. So I can actually go up here to my right hand corner, go to Viewport Overlays. I tend to use wireframe a lot instead of going to the viewport display options. I also can turn off face sets and masks here, as well as turn on statistics so I can see my actual poly count. So we'll get out of this for right now. I like to do this though, for my sculptures. We'll actually do this. This is what I generally do when I'm starting a sculpt and see as an issue in beginner sculpts. I don't see them think about the anatomy of the skull, and I think this is very important for basically having your eyes look believable inside the head. It's not always there. So like animal skulls, for instance, might not have eye sockets fully visible all the time. Like for instance, a deer skull. But I think it's a good habit to get into and understanding anatomy, is if you look at skulls. So I generally will use like Snakehook to pull out the nose or something. We'll do this, and then we'll do this. So another thing that I tend to use is an add-on called Bool Tool. What this is doing is basically adding Booleans on the fly. So I'll make another icosphere, and I'll drag this into the position where I want the eyeball to be. The cool thing about this is Bool Tool will basically do this automatically. So I'll show you what Booleans are. You go to the Modifiers tab, you can add a Boolean to basically Boolean your object into the other object. So see, this is difference, it'll cut out the shape. Intersect will do the opposite, and then union will merge the shapes together. We want union. But what the Bool Tool add-on does is make this in a convenient drop-down list on the sidebar. Under Edit, Bool Tool is the one that we care about. This actually comes with Blender. So I will usually basically mirror the object, which I do it with a mirror object right here, and I choose the object I'm working on. This is based off of the pivot point. So the pivot point of the main object I'm working on is in the center, so this will mirror straight across. Then I will click on the object, shift click the other object, and then just click this. These bottom ones, called brush booleans, will actually add the modifier stack. I usually just straight boolean. I'm going to make a duplicate because we're going to have the eyeball. Once we're done, the objects are actually connected and there's no inside object. This is the second eye object, but they're actually technically connected. Now I can remesh it again at a higher resolution, and then I can continue to sculpt on it. Don't remesh too high, it can crash your PC if you don't know what you're doing. That is one common issue, and I have done it when I rush to explain things to people. I also use the masking tools quite a bit, so Blender has masking tools. They're very useful. I think you should get used to using them. I commonly use them for eyes and all sorts of things. And also there's a masking tab up here in your left corner at the top. This contains a lot of different masking tools, mask from cavity and all this other stuff. A lot of this was introduced in 3.5 and is very useful. So these also have drop downs that you can modify and change the parameters of. But we're going to actually clear that and we're going to create some eyes. I set up this hotkey just for my use usually, because you can change the pivot point of these at the very bottom, the transform gizmos. If you go under sculpt, you can find this under set pivot, and I changed mine to control P so I can easily change the pivot point. So I'm going to do that right now. I hit control I to invert the mask, and then I will use these to make eye sockets essentially. This is just one of many ways to create eye sockets. I just tend to use this one a lot. And then you can keep remeshing. So some other tools I tend to use. I tend to use the Draw Sharp tool. In ZBrush, this is considered damn standard usually. And the reason I'm going through ZBrush hotkeys is just in case somebody from ZBrush comes over here and wants to learn it. Or if you ever want to transition to ZBrush later on. I use this to like build up wrinkles and just get forms in and draw things in. I also use it for lips commonly. I basically have constructed eyes. I'm getting some weird things here, but I'll fix that eventually. The reason I think it's important to learn the skull is because of this. You think of the cheekbones, and you think of the underlying shape of how the eyes fit into the head. That's the majority of the basics of sculpting. A lot of it has to do with you playing around with the tool sets. And the cool thing about the Boolean stuff is you can actually just keep merging new objects into your model or separating objects from your model. So there's a lot of usage in that tool set. There's another tool that I haven't talked about called Dyntopo. I do not use this to sculpt commonly because it's very performance heavy on higher levels of topology that you're adding to your model. But I can show you what I use it for. I use it for overhangs and mouths. We'll just like make a fake mouth right here really quick. I will drag it down. There we go. We'll just say this is our goofy little mouth for a goofy little guy. And what I'll commonly do is I will inflate it so the lips are touching. And this is why you wouldn't remesh, because remeshing will actually merge these vertices. So you don't want that usually. What you want is to have these not connected to each other. I will generally click on Dyntopo and I will remesh from this. I go to constant detail and I choose the amount I want and then I detail flood fill. If I remember correctly, this respects boundaries. I can't tell though. Yeah, it does. If you only want to add topology to one area, like let's say the lips here, you can actually go to masking tools and up here, go to auto masking, topology, and then mesh boundary. What this will do is make it so when you hit Shift A, you're only selecting the lips. Oh wait, no, it doesn't work in Dyntopo mode. That's what it is. Okay, so when you hit Shift A, you will mask out the area. Then you can hit Control I, and basically what this will allow you to do is only remesh the area that's unmasked. So I tend to do this quite a lot if I want to get details inside, say, lips, more than is everywhere else. That way I can do like lip wrinkles or other things. Consequently, you can also make face sets out of these selections. So I'll make a face set from visible, and what face sets will allow you to do is hide parts of your model. So if I only want to work on the lips, I can work on the bottom lips. If I only want to work on the top lips, I can work on the top lips. Dyntopo will delete these face sets, so be aware of that. But it's not hard to make them. So that is the main tool set I use for sculpting. The reason I'd use this over multi-res is because multi-res goes only based off the geometry that you have, so you can't make big changes easily. So like if I dragged out some horns, right, I'll have stretching on the geometry. Because you cannot remesh a multi-res model the way with the modifier, this wouldn't be fixable. But because you can remesh in Blender in this kind of workflow, you can hit Control R and it'll make that even topology for you to sculpt on, which means you can get details like segments or other things in your horns that you wouldn't be able to do inside multi-res. So if you were to use multi-res, I would recommend making a low poly model and then shrink wrapping over top of it. I'll show you with a sphere really quick how that would work. So I'll delete this. I'll just create another icosphere and we'll sculpt on it a little bit. So let's make it higher resolution. So we'll sculpt some details on it and maybe like a big section here or something. So the point of this is because of how multi-res works, this is how I would sculpt on a multi-resolution mesh. And multi-resolution is actually, it uses a different algorithm from subdivision surface from what I've been told. So it's actually better to use multi-resolution if you want to sculpt on your models. I'm going to get a basic cube just to like show you how the process of using this would work. So I'd get subdivision, I'll make it that, and we'll up the levels a bit. Now we're going to add a shrink wrap. So this is very particular. You want to use project and you want to click on negative. What this will do is when you select your object, which mine is the icosphere, it will conform to all the cavities. The other modes in shrink wrap will not usually do that. So this is very handy when you want to retain the detail on your low poly and keep sculpting in multi-res. And optimal display is always a thing you can turn off to see what's going on with the real topology. But oftentimes I don't need to do that. So when you apply this modifier, it will actually apply to the multi-res and live inside the multi-res modifier. That can be very handy if you ever need to go back and down. Applying the base shape will actually conform the low poly to your multi-res displacement. It even says it in the little hover over note tooltip. So now when I go down to 0, it'll literally conform to the shape as best as it can with the topology at hand. So that is the general workflow for Blender sculpting. Another thing we can do is actually use weight paint, and I can show you this. This is a really handy tool. Let's say that we want a sphere that's coming out of this sphere. Well, you can create a vertex group, and then you can begin weight painting on it. This section, and I usually turn down the viewport or sculpting display down to a lower level, but this weight paint will essentially only deform in this area if you set it up in the displacement or shrink wrap. I tend to use shrink wrap a lot. Basically what this will do, and I'll show you, I'll add a sphere. We'll add another icosphere just to show you. And you can basically have the shrink wrap pop that out of the surface. And I usually use target, is it target normal? And then I think it's outside surface. And what this will do is it'll pop out the geometry to match the shape that you have in shrink wrap. This can be very useful if you want to get like specific blobs or something on an object or a specific shape. And again, you can just apply this and it'll live inside your multi-res. Super handy. That way you can get like really complex shapes or very specific shapes in your sculptures. I mean, these are the main tools that I actually end up using. There are some other things among the brushes that I haven't gone over. When you go to Tool on the sidebar after hitting N, you have a slew of brush settings. If you ever wanted to put a texture into your sculpture brush, you can. It's under texture. If you ever want to change the fall off, it's all under fall off. If you ever want to change the method of strokes, you can do that too. So anchored will actually, anchored will pretty much plop it on when you drag it out. It's a drag out basically. So I can drag out squares because I don't have a texture on right now, but if I had a texture I could drag out details. I am going to cover VDMs now. VDMs are super cool. So I'm going to hide this. I'm gonna hide this and I'll make a new collection for this. There we go. So VDM Brush Baker is a free add-on that comes with Blender. You just have to enable it. This will allow you to basically create a plane with multi-res on it, but the plugin's doing a little bit more because when it bakes out the map, it will actually add a material to your model. So it's a little bit, it's something else. But the thing about VDMs is they can get overhangs. And what I mean by that is I can stretch out the model to make like a curved horn. And this part of the model will actually be inside the brush when you use it. So let me show you by baking this out as a test, just to show you. This will also create a brush for you, so you don't actually have to create a brush. I usually save the image that is made with this, just so I don't lose it. But in sculpt mode, we go to the top brush called draw, and you have your VDM brush right there. So how we can use this. Also, Alt-Q will allow you to select a object while in sculpt mode. So I will use this on my model now, and you can see I can pull out those horns I just sculpted. It's that quick, it's that easy, it's super handy. Another thing is it doesn't have to be an anchor. It can be drawn on. So let's say we do space, and you up the spacing to a little bit, and now I can like draw with these. So again, this can be a very handy tool. That would conclude my primer on sculpting. Thanks for watching!